Welcome to the third meditation on the second dwelling of Teresa of Avila's interior castle. We're continuing with this version of it, translated, interpreted really by Mirabai Starr. So this is the third time we have meditated on this, the second dwelling. The first dwelling, we crossed the threshold from the outside into the castle, and as Mirabai Starr reminded us in her introduction, we need to step over vipers to do that. Vipers which we may see as programs of our minds, dark aspects of our lives, perhaps hidden within our unconscious mind because of childhood hurts or later letdowns and so on, disappointments, insecurities, temptations to do bad stuff, jealousies and so on. And we're encouraged to step over these. Don't get too involved with them. But now, entering the second, phase, if you like, the second dwelling, which may have many rooms. Teresa warns us that it's tougher now, it's harder. You know, when we read something or study an idea, a philosophy, study prayer, we can quite easily be distanced and read it as an intellectual exercise, dipping in and out of it perhaps emotionally, but retaining the safe perspective that we're reading this thing or we're watching something about somebody else. But Teresa keeps reminding us that this is about us. This is real, it's not an entertainment or a magic carpet to bliss, as Thomas Keating used to say about a recreational attitude to prayer. It is real. And the vipers are stronger here. And the sense of danger, perhaps, is greater. Also the sense of what might be lost. There is a part to this, says Teresa, that where we're not quite sure whether to carry on or to try to go back and out again. And one of the reasons why it's harder now is because we're beginning to hear the voice of Christ. But we don't have language, we don't have the ability to respond to enter into dialogue with Christ. Because what we hear is still faint. However, it is an amplification. In the first dwelling, we could just about make out the light coming through the trees in the forest of our lives. The light from the center. The grace of God, we could just about catch a glimpse, but now we're beginning to hear. Before, it didn't matter that we couldn't respond, that we couldn't speak, because we couldn't hear. But now we can hear, so there is a frustration. But we're not hearing at this point directly from Christ. We're hearing Christ through people that we admire, who know Christ perhaps, or through scripture and the writings of mystics and so on. Teresa of Avila and others. But we're not hearing it directly enough to be sure. And so we feel the biting of the vipers. And to Teresa, they are increasing the volume of their noise. Perhaps because the ego is sensing that it's losing control here. It's being called into question, and the insecurities are coming strong. And the ego is not sure now if it is in control, whether it can keep safety and surety, fight off the enemy. I'm going to read a little bit from this chapter. Teresa is suggesting that we need to be at home in ourselves. We need to look inside rather than outside for our help. We're living a dissipated life because we are subject to so many programs and so many attempted cures to our unhappiness. Again, Thomas Keating speaks of programs for happiness that we construct in our lives to try to alleviate our suffering and come into some sort of vision of freedom that we concoct for ourselves. And so there is a battle unfolding inside of us. I'm reading from page 62. This battle unfolding inside of us would be enough to bring us back to recollection. So this wrangling, if we are conscious of it, then there can be a reminder. And she says, what hope do we have of finding rest outside of ourselves if we cannot be at ease within? Whether or not we appreciate them, we must always live in close proximity to our faculties. They are our greatest relatives and most faithful friends, and yet, as if they were resentful of the damage our imperfections have done to them, our faculties seem to be waging war upon us. Peace. Peace, says Christ. Peace, my friends. He often urged peace upon his own disciples. Believe me, if we don't cultivate peace at home, we will not find it in alien places. End the war. By the blood that he shed for us, I ask those of you who have not begun to go inside yourselves to enter now. And those who are already in, don't let warfare make you turn back. A relapse is worse than a lapse. You can already see what you've lost. Trust more in the mercy of God and less in your own judgment. Then you will see how His Majesty brings you safely from one dwelling to the next, and settles you in a land where those wild beasts cannot touch you or do you any harm. You yourself will have power over these creatures. You will laugh at them. You will enjoy more blessings than you ever imagined. In this life, I mean. Remember, when you are tormented by the spirit of evil, you cannot recollect yourself by force. Recollection must come gently. Little by little, you will be able to practice prayer for longer periods, undisturbed. Again and again, Teresa calls us to contemplative prayer. Gently, gently. Stop the war, she says. Stop the raging. When we settle into prayer, invariably we notice this raging of thought, of concern, of all those programs that are playing over and over again as we generate thought after thought after thought. It's what our brains do. And when we get hooked on these thoughts, then anxiety is invariably the result. And the more and more hooked we become, the more obsessed we may become, and the greater the anxiety, until it can lead us to breakdown and mental illness. Which in themselves are opportunities. Because when we meet such, we are always changed. A contemplative prayer requires great courage, because those parts of our lives that we have been saved from by our unconscious minds, I use the word saved very loosely, because it is a hiding, it is a protection, but it ultimately is not real and can only be temporary. But these surface, these come into consciousness, come into play. But Teresa encourages us to go inside and to practice. Certainly at this stage in the second dwelling, practice contemplative prayer. And she says that the more we do it, the longer we will be able to do it. And the more we will give over to the grace, the flow of grace, to the will of God, to the healing of God, and be able to go further into this interior landscape, castle of many rooms. Last time I led a meditation, I offered the Jesus prayer, the prayer of the heart, an ancient form of contemplative prayer. This time, I invite you to engage for 10 minutes or so in centering prayer. You can find out the history of this elsewhere. Easy to look up Thomas Keating and contemplative outreach, for example. But now I offer it simply as practice. Thomas Keating used to say that centering prayer is not contemplative prayer itself. It's a way into it. It is a method, not a technique. It is a practice that helps us to find the stillness, through which contemplative prayer may be entered. And our practices in Lectio Divina, for example, are practices of contemplative prayer. The use of the imagination, the walking in nature and so on, bring us into contemplative prayer. But centering prayer can offer us discipline and stillness. And we can do it like this. Just begin by being in a comfortable but upright posture. Perhaps with your feet firmly on the ground, sensing the earth, the solidity. And back straight, shoulders relaxed. You might sense the connection through the top of our head with the air, with the cosmos, with eternity. And we make our intention. Our intention is to let go of thought, to give over to Christ. And so enter into the peace that Christ offers when he says, "Peace be with you. Do not be afraid." Let us make the intention to allow the thoughts that are going to be generated to simply be there. They're there, there's no point in fighting them, no war to wage here. They are okay, whatever they are. But let's not follow them. Let them be like boats underneath a bridge on which we stand, just moving with the flow of the river, but we don't jump into the boat. It is perhaps useful to have a word or a phrase to introduce as we notice the thoughts circling our minds and inviting us to focus on them like vipers. So take a word or a phrase, perhaps a name for God or something like love, but not something that is going to cause you to think about it theologically or anything like that. It's just a word that marks our intention. I often used to use the phrase just be still. Be still. Whatever the word or phrase that suggests itself to you, just accept it. Don't think about it too much. Don't try to change it. Just accept it. And introduce it now in your sitting. Out loud or under the breath. You may prefer just to simply focus on the breath, breathing in, breathing out. So you repeat the word or you repeat the noticing of the breath. Until such a time you feel you can let it go and simply be present. And each time you notice yourself thinking or following one of these myriad of thoughts, and just reintroduce the word or the breath. And those thoughts will lose their power. They can only last a few seconds if you don't attend to them. And don't worry if you don't feel a single moment of clarity or peace. It doesn't matter. The practice matters. And the more you do it, as Teresa says, the longer you will be able to do it. And the more open to the grace you will become. So I'm going to sound a bell, and then in about 10 minutes, Malcolm will invite you to come back into a kind of more active consciousness, and will lead you in the sharing that is to come. If you are simply joining us by video, then there will be a further bell to end the meditation. So just let that word or phrase or the breath come now.
now we can gently come back into external things, sharing what is internal, sharing it externally through our impressions and concepts and thoughts, whatever may have arisen for us during this meditation. If anybody would like to speak, we can follow our usual way of doing that. If you could just raise your hand and then unmute.